Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope everyone is fine and doing well in their homes and they're not bored. Do let me know in the comment section what kind of activities and what kind of hobbies are you people carrying out in your homes. I'll be glad to know. Maybe some people are studying and some people are not, so I'll be glad to know what you people are doing in your homes at this time. Do let me know in the comment section. Now let's start our lecture of today's. This is Introduction to Psychology Part 1 PHY 312 by Dear Knowledge. So today we will be discussing the cutting of the corpus callosum. In our previous videos, we have discussed nervous system in great detail, what actually nervous system is, and we are carrying the cerebrum part of the forebrain, and we are going through a deep discussion. We have discussed the we have discussed the forebrain, then we discussed the cerebrum, and in cerebrum we discussed the cerebral cortex, and we also discussed the corpus callosum and the left and right cerebral hemisphere. But I found some very interesting and very amazing topics, a brief discussion of the corpus callosum and the hemisphere. So I decided to let you all know and just go through a quick revision of the previous videos. So this video composed of cutting the corpus callosum, in which you people will know the split brain, in which the split brain operation was done, and you will also know that why do they cut the corpus callosum and what was the reason of cutting the corpus callosum. And then you will know about the Roger Sperry, who did experiments on such patients whose corpus callosum was cut. And then you will know the specialized abilities of the two hemispheres, in which you people will know about the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, and then after that you people will know the comparison between right and left hemisphere. So I have included a picture which I found very useful. This is a picture, the transparent view of the brain, which shows the corpus callosum, the C-shaped bundle of axons that link the left and right hemisphere. So you can see the cerebral hemisphere, and then you can see the corpus callosum. So a corpus callosum is basically a thick band of nerve fibers that connect the two cerebral hemisphere and act as a communication link between them. So let's start with the cutting the corpus callosum, which is the split brain. In the split brain operation, the corpus callosum is cut. And how were split brain operation tested to reveal difference in the abilities of the two hemispheres? And how do the left and right hemisphere differ? Since the discoveries made by the Broca and Wernicke, the most dramatic evidence illustrating the lateralization of functions is the two cerebral hemisphere has come from surgical procedure called the split brain operation. So split brain is a surgical procedure that involves the cutting the corpus callosum. So this operation is used to stop or reduce recurring seizure in severe cases of epilepsy that can't be treated in any other function. So the procedure involves surgically cutting the corpus callosum, the thick band of axons that connects the two cerebral hemisphere. But the question is, what was the logic behind cutting the corpus callosum? The answer is that an epileptic seizure typically occurs when neurons begin firing in a disorganized fashion in one region of the brain. So the disorganized neural firing quickly spreads from one hemisphere to the other hemisphere through the corpus callosum. So if the corpus callosum is cut, seizures should be contained in just one hemisphere, reducing their severity or eliminating them altogether. So this is what exactly happened when the split brain operation was first tried in 1940s. So Surprisingly, cutting the corpus callosum initially seemed to produce no effect on the patients other than to reduce their epileptic seizures. Their ability to engage in routine conversations and tasks seemed to be unaffected. And on the basis of these early observations, some brain researchers speculated that the corpus callosum served no function whatsoever. So, one famous psychologist, Carl Lashley, joked that its primary function seemed to be to keep the two hemispheres from sagging. So let's discuss about the Roger Sperry. He was a psychologist and neuroscientist, and he's known for his pioneering research using the split brain patients, research using the split brain patients to investigate the relationship between brain and behavior. So Sperry received the 1981 Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. So in 1960s, however, psychologist and neuroscientist Roger Sperry in 1913 to 1994, that is his date, and his colleague began systematically testing the abilities of the split brain patients using the simple but ingenious research techniques. In one experiment, Sperry asked a split brain patient to close her eyes and then place a fork in her hand, and when asked to identify the object, she was unable to answer. Now, can you explain why? Remember, sensation and movements on the left side of the body are processed by the right hemisphere, and sensation of the fork in the hemisphere of the split brain subject's left hand was directed to her right hemisphere. But as Broca and Wernicke had discovered, the left hemisphere is responsible for language functions because the split brain's subject's corpus callosum had been cut. Her right hemisphere had no way of sharing the information with her verbal left hemisphere. So the right hemisphere could not say what the left hand was holding, and the verbal left hemisphere could not feel anything or could feel nothing. So in this experimental situation, split brains subjects would often deny that anything was in their hand or in their left hand, or they would make random guesses. So, in other experiments, Sperry and his colleagues used the apparatus, which you can see here. They directed split brain patients to focus on a point in the middle of the screen and then briefly flashed a word or picture to the left or right of the midpoint. And visual information to the right of the midpoint would be projected to the person's left hemisphere, and visual information to the left of the midpoint would be projected to the right hemisphere. So several objects were hidden behind the screen. The split brain patients would reach under a partition below the screen to pick up the concealed object but could not see them. So in typical experiment, Sperry projected the image of an object concealed behind the screen, such as hammer, to the left of the midpoint. Thus the image of the hammer was sent to the right the nonverbal hemisphere, and asked to verbally identify the image flashed on the screen. So split brain patients could not do so and often denied that anything had appeared on the screen. So the verbal left hemisphere had no way of knowing the information that had been sent to the right hemisphere. So, however, when asked to use the left hand to reach under the partition of the object that had been displayed, patient could correctly pick up the hammer. But why? Because the left hand was controlled by the same right hemisphere and that had seen the image of the hammer. So Sperry's experiment reconfirmed that the language abilities of the left hemisphere discovered by Broca and Wernicke over 100 years earlier. But note that with split brain patients, even though the right hemisphere could not express itself verbally, it nonetheless processed information and expressed itself non-verbally. And the split brain individuals were able to pick up the correct object. So, over the last 3 decades, researchers have gained numerous insight about the brain's lateralization of functions by studying the split brain patients using brain imaging techniques with normal subjects and using other techniques. On the basis of this evidence, researchers have concluded that in most people, the left brain is superior in language abilities, speech, reading, and writing. But that doesn't mean that the right hemisphere is useless or it have no importance. The right hemisphere is more involved in nonverbal emotional expressions and visual or spatial tasks that involve deciphering complex visual cues, such as completing a puzzle or manipulating blocks to match a particular design. So the right hemisphere also excels in recognizing face and emotional facial cues, reading maps, copying designs, and drawing. So finally, the right hemisphere shows a higher degree of specialization for musical appreciation or responsiveness, but not necessary for musical abilities, which involves the use of the right hemisphere as well. So let's talk about the comparison between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. I have summarized the research findings. This picture summarizes the research findings for the different specialized abilities of the 2 hemispheres. For right-handed people, as you look at the picture, it's important to keep the 2 points in mind. First, differences between the left and right hemisphere were almost relative differences, not absolute differences. In other words, both hemispheres of your brain are activated to some extent as you perform virtually any task. In the normal brain, the left and the right hemisphere function in an integrated function, constantly exchanging information. So this picture indicates which hemisphere typically displays greater activation or exerts greater control over a particular function. So the second thing which needs to be kept in mind is that many functions of the cerebral hemisphere, such as those involving the primary sensory and motor areas, are symmetrical. They are located in the same place and are performed in the same way on both the left and right hemisphere. So, given the basic findings on the laterality of different functions in the 2 hemispheres, can you speculate, differentiate between left and right hemisphere, and how did you get the point? How can you differentiate between left and right hemisphere? So this is the answer. This is the picture where you can see the functions between left and right hemisphere. Here you can see, if we talk about the vision, the left hemisphere can easily pick up the words or letters, but cannot pick up the geometrical patterns, faces, emotional expression, etc. Whereas through vision, on the right hemisphere, because of the right hemisphere, you can pick up the geometrical patterns, faces, emotional expressions. And if we talk about the hearing, if there is only left hemisphere, a person would only be able to recognize the language sound. But if that person have the right hemisphere, so the function of the right hemisphere is to pick up the non-language sounds, or musics. So if you talk about the memory, the left hemisphere only pick up the verbal memory, whereas the right hemisphere keep the non-verbal memory. And about the language, the left hemisphere have the ability to recognize the speech, grammar rules, reading, writing, arithmetic, etc. Whereas the right hemisphere has the ability to know the emotional tone of a speech. Like, is that person asking a question, or is that person passing a kind of comments, or is that person angry, etc. So to the emotional tone of the speech, you will be able to recognize it through your right hemisphere. If you talk about the special abilities, the left hemisphere have no such abilities, but the right hemisphere have the abilities like geometry, sense of direction, distance, mental rotation of shapes, etc. So, according to Mariti Benich in 1998, the functionally distinct cerebral hemisphere appear to coordinate their performance in multiple ways through the corpus callosum, which allows for the dynamic interchange of information. And then he said a lot about it, but I have in this picture you will only know the important points. So, to further understand the implication of lateralization of function, it will be critical to understand interhemispheric integration, as research already suggests that the whole is greater than sum of its parts. So this was the end of the video. If you got the point, your concept is clear, you like the video, you can click on the like button. And if not, if there is any point that was creating confusion, and if any point that was not clear, you can ask us in the comment section and we will be happy to help you out. If you want to get notification of the upcoming videos, you can click on the bell icon. You can subscribe to our channel, because we usually upload the course based videos on every Saturday and Sunday, and the request based videos are uploaded from Monday to Friday, which are our working days. You can share the link of the video or channel with your friends and families, because sharing is caring. Until then, Allah Hafiz.